Elections have consequences. In November 2024, there will be an election for the presidency of the United States, and we at Farsight want to know what will happen in the United States if any particular candidate wins the election. As of the recording of this video, there are three major candidates for that office: the incumbent, Joe Biden, the former president, Donald Trump, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, both Biden and Trump campaigns are minimizing the possibility of a successful Robert F. Kennedy Jr. challenge, but that can be seen as normal campaign propaganda. Whether or not Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could actually win the election depends on what happens between now and Election Day. Donald Trump currently has legal problems, and Joe Biden has age-related issues as well as some major national and international political issues to deal with, all of which for both candidates are building up over the summer and fall. So we really do not know what will happen in this presidential contest. If Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gets invited to participate in any of the political debates, then all simplistic predictions may be questionable. Kennedy's major problem seemed to be his voice, since he has vocal cords which are partially paralyzed, and the fact that most major media are dead set against him, presenting him in a very unfavorable light. So all three candidates have their campaign liabilities, and all three have their strong points. How this will all balance out in the end will depend on what happens over the summer and the fall. Now, this project seeks to determine, using remote viewing as it is applied at Farsight, to look at what happens in the United States after the election under conditions in which one of these three candidates win. So we are dealing with three separate timelines, which, if you know much about our research into remote viewing, is clearly something that we can examine using remote viewing. I have dealt with the physics of how this is possible in other settings, and you will forgive me if I do not repeat myself here. In addition to being the director of Farsight, I am also a political scientist who specializes in elections and voting, both substantively as well as with respect to the application of mathematical models to the study of elections. So, I think it is useful to point out as a political scientist that this presidential election really is quite unique in American history, and many political scientists may find it very challenging to apply normal analytical approaches to this election to make a prediction. So let me give you an example that focuses on visual and auditory aspects of these candidates, things that are simple to see and hear for the casual observer. Now, this election is much more complicated than these aspects, of course, but they nonetheless serve as useful examples to shed light on what is being done and what is not being done that make election analysis more challenging using traditional approaches only. So, and again only as one type of example, in this age of the importance of social media, both optic and auditory elements become particularly important. It is not just a matter of the political issues that the candidates emphasize. Optic and auditory elements, which involve how a candidate looks and sounds, truly assisted John F. Kennedy's win over Richard Nixon in 1960. Now, John F. Kennedy was a natural charismatic, and he did not have formal training in such matters. But training and good advice also matter, and I remember the situation in which a TV news reporter gave a scathing comment on air about Ronald Reagan during the 1984 campaign, only to find that a senior Reagan campaign representative called him up the next day to thank him for the great coverage of the day before. Now, the TV news reporter could not believe his ears. He asked what the campaign representative was talking about, since the reporter said terrible things about Ronald Reagan. Well, the campaign representative then responded by saying that they didn't care about what the reporter said, since the audience doesn't remember the words spoken. Rather, it was the imagery that was visible behind the reporter that really mattered, where Ronald Reagan was shown in dramatic settings looking very presidential, fit, and handsome during the commentary. That is what the audience remembered. That is what stuck in their minds. The words that the reporter spoke did not matter. The words were in one ear and out the other, so to speak. Now, people voted based on the feelings in their gut, and the visuals in the report were striking and positive for Reagan. Of course, Ronald Reagan was a master at optimizing the visuals in public settings. A B-grade movie star put into a political setting is a supernova. Training really does matter. Interestingly, after the 1984 campaign, Walter Mondale, who was Ronald Reagan's opponent, mentioned that the Democratic Party should never again nominate a candidate who did not have training in such things. Now, all this is important when analyzing this election in 2024 because none of the candidates have perfected the optics and auditory elements of their candidacies that would make a traditional analysis along such lines easier to apply. So let me mention some of the challenges that the candidates are facing and some of the things that could have been done that would have made my job as a political scientist a bit easier. And again, I'm using this only as one overly simplistic example pulled from an otherwise very complicated political situation. Continuing, for example, if I was advising the candidates, I would have suggested to Donald Trump that he lose a lot of weight and possibly get a facelift 2 or 3 years ago, so that he could maximize the appearance of a fighter with a new agenda. Now, the facelift would have been needed as a consequence of the weight loss. In combination, that would have positively affected his optics. His legal issues were predictable, so he could have reframed the political setting to some extent by resetting his image. Now, for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he is already very physically fit and mentally nimble, but I would have suggested that he get a face and neck lift a few years ago so that he would look like a younger Kennedy filled with charismatic energy. With regard to his voice, I would have suggested that he enlist the assistance of a vocal coach that works with some of the leading opera singers today. Now, the best opera singers deal with all sorts of extreme vocal issues. I used to sing such music professionally, so I know what those singers go through. They blast their vocal cords with tasks that would make any normal person mute in no time. But their vocal coaches know all sorts of tricks, including mists, teas, vocal exercises, medicines, and much more to keep problematic vocal cords working as best as possible, even under extreme conditions. Now, these are things that doctors don't often know about. Vocal cord paralysis is neurological and serious, so Kennedy's situation is not minor. But opera coaches do wonders under very adverse conditions to maximize that which is possible, and they know what to do before every performance. Opera singers never simply go on stage and sing. There is a lot of vocal cord preparation before every performance. Now, Kennedy does not sing, of course, but he does use his vocal cords for speaking under extreme conditions. And I would have wanted to know the full extent of the advice that Kennedy was getting in that regard. Really good operatic vocal coaches are worth every penny, and I have seen them work miracles under seemingly impossible conditions. Now, for Joe Biden, I am not sure what I would have advised. He apparently has already had plastic surgery on his face, so there is not much more that can be done on that level. He is also not overweight. It is possible that some things could have been done regarding his age-related problems if they were initiated a few years ago. Much research has been done on improving the mental functioning of aging patients, often involving optimizing certain lifestyle and nutrition aspects that affect the brain. And I would have suggested that he get expert advice in that regard, again, a few years ago. Now, Dr. Sanjay Gupta wrote a recent and very useful article about this for CNN in May 2024. Campaign history is filled with examples of candidates who either did not get good advice or did not take good advice when it was given to them. Examples are Richard Nixon in 1960, Michael Dukakis in 1980, Walter Mondale in 1984, Al Gore in 2000, and Hillary Clinton in 2016. But in each of those cases, it made the job of a political scientist much easier. It is not that political scientists could accurately predict the outcome of the election in all those cases, since some of those elections were truly cliffhangers. But at least we had some traditional things to work with, and we could apply our normal set of tools. But with the current campaign in 2024, we really did not have an easy job. The deficits of each candidate are obvious. They'll all have challenges, and it is really difficult to sort out how this will all end up affecting the election. And then there is the matter of electoral interference from whoever and whatever, including foreign intelligence agencies. It is all very unpredictable in terms of predicting the outcome. So one of the most interesting things that we can do at this stage is not to predict the outcome of the election, but rather to examine what will happen under the situation in which each of the candidates is the winner. You see, in a universe of multiple timelines, there are timelines in which each candidate wins. So our job at Farsight is not to predict one single outcome, but to analyze the aftermath of three very different outcomes. This is not a traditional method of political analysis, of course, and this is not taught at any university on the planet, but it can be done under carefully controlled conditions, and that is what we are going to do now. I am Courtney Brown, Director of Farsight. At Farsight, we study the perceptual process known as remote viewing. Remote viewing is a mental process that is done using highly structured methodologies that are derived from those developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes. But Farsight is civilian, and we use remote viewing for scientific experiments and for exploration. This new project conducted at Farsight employs remote viewers who are among the most experienced and highly trained viewers existing today. The remote viewers all describe much the same thing, all corroborating reports, and it is worth emphasizing that the remote viewing was done totally blind, and none of the remote viewers communicated with one another about the project during the data collection phase. Even their final presentations were recorded on video with no one else in the room. This is not science fiction, told through riveting remote viewing conducted under defendable, clean scientific conditions. This is as real as it gets. And friends, I want you to always remember that Farsight is data-driven. Because we are data-driven and we show you our raw data, that is evidence that we are not trying to manipulate you. But that is not what happens in the mainstream. Nearly everything you hear in the mainstream news is he said, she said stuff. People who call themselves reporters go out and interview other people who tell the reporters that they are telling them the truth. And then the reporters get in front of a camera and tell the world what they have heard is the truth. But it is rarely the truth. This he said, she said reporting process leaves the mainstream media open to blatant manipulation. People tell reporters what they want the reporters to report, and bureaucracies, politicians, and just about everybody knows how to manipulate gossip-hungry reporters. So what about Farsight? Again, we are data-driven. We never report he said, she said stuff. Also, we show you our raw data that is collected using a novel methodology that we have learned how to perfect. It took many years for us at Farsight to be able to do what we do, but we do it well. And through our many projects, we give you a window into a reality that you cannot get from anywhere else. Every remote viewing project has a target. The target is that which serves as the focus for the remote viewers. Now, the remote viewers obviously do not know the target when they do their work. Absolutely all of their work is done under totally blind conditions. Even when they record their videos as the last stage of their work, they are doing it totally alone in the studio. They are told the target and the nature of the project only after all of their work is completed. For this project, the target is the most important and publicly visible consequence of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. The timeline for this project is December 2024 through March 2025. There are three focuses that each viewer perceives. The first is the most important and publicly visible consequence of Donald Trump winning the 2024 U.S. presidential election. The second focus is the most important and publicly visible consequence of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. winning the 2024 U.S. presidential election. And the third focus is the most important and publicly visible consequence of Joe Biden winning the 2024 U.S. presidential election. Also, for each focus, we examine the subject most central to the most important and publicly visible consequence of each candidate winning the 2024 U.S. presidential election. We will put up text on the screen when the viewers are describing their data to help you remember these things. So let us begin, starting with a session by Intisam and then Aziz Brown, Yeme Janae, and finally Shantae. This is what our viewers perceive regarding what happens in the United States under conditions in which each candidate wins the election. After you see all the sessions for this project, I will return to help pull things together.
Okay, well, prepare yourself, guys.